Welcome to Cultivate the Ordinary podcast, curious conversations for the anxious, frustrated, and bored. I'm Travis.
And I'm Jessie. So often we're held captive by screens, schedules, and media that's mind-numbing and polarizing. This leaves us seeing dimly through a fog. We want to spark more imagination and a better awareness of God's presence in the everyday.
Join us on a fun journey of discovery and curiosity as we look at the ordinary through the lenses of joy, wonder, beauty, and hope. All right, welcome to another episode of Cultivate the Ordinary. I'm joined by my best friend, wife, and co-host, back in the saddle, Jessica Lynn Vonksness.
That's quite the setup.
It's good to be back here with you, and I've had a few recent episodes where I've just done by myself, and so...
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be back.
Great. Well, we got a fun one today. We were going to go back to the ordinary and yet extraordinary space of marriage. We are going to talk about creating a culture in our marriages that prioritizes things like playfulness, appreciation, spaces to talk about our needs and hurts, making sure that we're seen and heard, and really working on building our friendship. And a lot of this stuff seems like it's so obvious that there's got to be a whole lot more. And I think what we're finding is there's more, but this is the basis for strong relationships.
Yeah, we feel really passionate about this topic. Like, we've shared in other podcasts, like we really struggle. We definitely, everybody tells us, oh, you guys work so great together. You can do a podcast. You can work for America's Kids Belong. You can, you must just, really enjoy working from home together. I could never do that with my spouse. We've heard that so much, and we're like, are you kidding me? Like,
that really hurts me that you're saying that right now. Because I would never say that. And you're saying it like on a podcast.
Are you kidding me? Is not about not loving to work with you, but it's not easy.
I am kidding. I would and have said that to you.
I do like being home with you.
I would and have said that to you. We do struggle. The sparks fly. We pull it together and we love it. We do love a lot of the things that we create together, but it sometimes is really hard. And so, like, to your point, when we hear people say, I could never do that with my spouse, sometimes we're going, well, we just choose to, and it does not make it
right. It's not like we're perfect at it and we can do these things better than most people. We definitely have had and continue to have a lot of challenges with how we communicate, how we relate to each other, how we understand one another, like all of it. So we have just always been grabbing at whatever tools we can to make our marriage as strong as it can be, and to kind of also inspire others that are in our lives that there's something you can do. You can have agency over that. So Dr. John Gottman is the #1 marriage researcher in the country. He's got over 40 years with his wife, Julie Gottman, of research, and they had what they called the Seattle Love Lab, where for many, many years they just researched and observed couples, everything from their heart rates to their, stress levels and blood samples, and they observed their interactions and watched for common traits. And we'll say a little bit more about the Gottman stuff later. But this couple and the 7 principles for making marriage work training that Travis and I just went through has been completely transformative. It's just really very simple, but also it's based on research. So we just want to, give you a taste of that, and then just also talk about just this, like you said, the friendship and this creating a culture of just like fun in your marriage.
Yeah. I am going to do the best I can. I put on some chapstick before this that I just got off the shelf, and I don't I'm not even sure it's chapstick at this point. I don't know. Like, does chapstick does it expire?
I don't know.
Because it looked like the size, but it's like, I'm just wondering if it's something else.
Was it one of the
Because I got it also on my tongue. Like, I mean, it tastes like Vaseline and even worse.
What does it smell like?
You want to lean in?
I know, I can't tell. It smells expired.
Okay, so I'm going to deal with expired chapstick and do my best to, if at some point my tongue is growing numb or something, we'll keep monitoring.
I got Benadryl.
We'll monitor for, okay. All right, so let's get back into this. So quote that always makes me laugh by Woody Allen says, some people drink deeply from the river of knowledge and some only gargle. And hopefully that this podcast has always been at least somewhere in the middle of that. So when it comes to gaining knowledge, that we're beyond gargling, at least we drink from the well. So let's open with kind of going into one of the basis of friendships, and just a thing that's incredibly healthy for all humans is humor and laughter. Mm-hmm. So let's talk some about that. I actually been doing a lot of kind of just reading on books on humor and faith, and then other areas. There's a book I picked up, and this was like just kind of a small Kindle, but it was called Humor, Its Hidden Power, Weapon, Shield, and Psychological Salve by Nicole Force. And it kind of walks you through historically all these dramatic moments of, whether it was, the Jewish people being persecuted and killed by the Nazis, and how humor, even in the worst of human conditions, was able to be that salve and be that shield, even be that way to cope and relate. And so if we can find in the worst moments of struggle in humanity's suffering that humor is this gift, it's a way to cope and to even heal through hard times, then certainly, and applying that to our marriage and keeping that in the forefront is a huge critical thing. And so, yeah, we just want to look at humor and talk some more about that to kick things off. So,
yeah, so I really love that quote, that it just kind of talks about, you talked about the humor is a psychological salve for difficult experiences and painful things. And I know, we've needed it at times. You definitely have more of a personality to want to bring the humor to tension.
Yeah.
So, and I haven't always appreciated it.
Well, there's right and wrong times, but I think there are also times that we discover that it feels disruptive to maybe the feeling in the moment. And there's wrong times for that, but there's probably times that is actually a needed thing.
Yeah.
A thing that is necessary to kind of break up something happening that's...
Well, I mean, just even in this course we just did, the idea that making a joke is a type of repair attempt. Like if you've gotten off the rails in a conversation or a conflict and someone's trying to joke, it's a way of trying to repair. And I think I now, like, I see it a little bit more that way, as like, okay, we can work with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It does break the tension. So what are some ways, like, you feel like humor best, breaks or diffuses tension in marriage?
Okay, so I'm going to first draw from a quote to answer that by Victor Borge, who was a famous comedian, who said, "Laughter is the shortest distance between two people." I think there is something about laughter and humor that in moments it connects, it brings us together in a moment. And it has a way, like you said already, of an attempt at a repair of something, when we can get ourselves to laugh at each other or laugh at something in the moment. Sometimes how would you say that hits you? It's easier for me to probably quickly, at times diffuse the tension through that, or to think of something light. For you it isn't as much because you're maybe deeper in your feelings. But, I'm sure we can think of examples though of where you have been able to we've been able to laugh at ourselves for a moment and kind of get out of that, dark cloud of whatever it is, and then come back to that. The idea with humor in these situations is not to be an escape that you use to then get out of something and then don't come back to it and deal with it. But sometimes we can get, would you agree? We can get so deep into our feelings that we're not maybe kind of even thinking as rationally as we could, or missing something, and it has a way of almost.
Right. Yeah, no, and I think that at the core of what a lot of is going on in my mind, and probably for others, is when we're having a conflict or something, I'm thinking we need to resolve this before we get back to lightheartedness, and or I don't want to push this aside and not address it and move on to just joking around, because to me that's just surface. And, as an Enneagram 4, it's that's the last thing. I want to be authentic, and I want to be understood, and I want this to be resolved.
Yeah.
But I think, in our recent conversations about repair in relationships, in conflict and stuff, is that that the humor being the avenue for repair is what actually is more important than resolve, because some of our conflicts are not resolvable. They're perpetual problems that are rooted in personality, or just kind of our core values, or families of origins values, things like that.
Right. Yeah. And I think what it does too, humor can have a way of, Will Durst said, it's the laughter that allows hope to creep back on the inhale. Hope to creep back. And I love that so much, because it, it's in those moments of, despair setting in, or, but it does something to the actual body. It's it kickstarts endorphins and things. And there's been research, and I'm referencing this book again that I talked about, but that there's been significant research on what even laughter does to the central nervous system and the immune system. Quote, laughter has been found to induce the production of disease-fighting cells called gamma interferon T cells and improve the immune system functioning by reducing the production of hormones associated with stress. Others have said the process of laughing has been referred to as internal jogging because of the repeated muscle contractions and increased oxygen intake it induces. Internal jogging. So
I don't have to work out?
No, just laugh a lot. I mean, that's,
I'm internal jogging right now. How many
Not
calories?
Laughing at you. I'm internally jogging with you.
How many calories did you burn laughing today?
Oh man, not enough. But we're talking in this case, we're talking momentary times of laughing. But I can look back at seasons, the darkest, deepest season I ever went through in my life. It was partly through the gift and the power of laughter that I think God used for me to heal.
And this was your
divorce,
right?
Yeah. I mean, but going through having, in my story of an abandonment in our relationship, and the fallout of that. But yeah, so.
And that's how you got the grocery getter.
Yeah, I had a really goofy car, this is a great example. So I don't know if I've referenced this in the podcast before, but I grew up as a 80s kid. And although this was into the 90s, this is how cool our family was. We had a giant 20-foot station wagon, wood grain, Buick, where your seats facing back. So anyway, that whole thing, and I just station wagons always made me laugh. Later in life, thinking back to how goofy they are, and so one time in my life, this worst time of my life, I was distracted by this humorous idea that what if I would buy an old station wagon and paint it in such a goofy way that you can't help but just get in and ride this thing around and laugh just being in it. It was like it was a prop. Mm-hmm. That I needed, like a circus prop or something.
Well, it was a useful tool in catching your second wife.
So it was painted ridiculous. It was called the Grocery Getter. It had like the hood painted with a grocery bag, and it's called that. And it's all ridiculous car. Yeah. So I mean, that's the thing about it is this car for me at that time functioned as a way that it was an escape, creatively to create something just so goofy and this was my daily driver. And so you couldn't help but just, for me, like every time I would go to that car to drive it, I would laugh out loud. It was so ridiculous. And I would get people honking and pictures with it all the time and like so much laughter. And so that's what that served to me. So when I look at humor, like in some ways, I mean, God incredibly showed up in my life at the darkest time, revealed himself in powerful ways that I had never seen before and needed to cling to. And yet I will also say, I do think partly humor saved my life. Yeah. So when I look at the subject of humor and talking about it in the context of marriage and difficulty and stuff, I don't say it lightly, even just of like, oh, this is just a tool to,
Right, yeah.
I mean, cope with. Like this comes from my heart. Yeah, so, and really from my experience. So, yeah.
So when we think back in terms of, friendship and humor and what it means we've set this all up like talking about marriage and friendship. But I think most people out there, if you've been married for very long, it's not the first thing that you're like, oh yeah, my spouse is my very best friend and I never think anything different, because what naturally happens is over time we stop building and investing in that friendship. And we you can become like roommates, just coexisting and, do helpful things for each other, make important decisions together, co-parent, like all these things can be happening and you can be civil, but without that friendship that you continue to put like deposits into this bank of friendship and love and admiration for who they are as a person, you likely are not going to have much fun with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's very true. And so what in your mind are some ways or activities that people can kind of do to strengthen their friendship?
Yeah, so the first things that come to mind are like, you have to be curious about your spouse to continue to grow, like what Dr. Gottman would call like your love map. Like you have this internal picture of what's going on with your spouse inside of them, like in their internal world. So I think the longer you're married, the more you assume you know them, right. You know their personality, you know how they think about things, you know what they're going to do in just about any situation because you think you got it. And the thing is that A, our perceptions change over time, and B, we do change, like people change. So like what jazzed you and got you excited about your work life may be different this year than it was last year, how you might respond in stressful situations might look a little different than it did last year. Like me continuing to ask you questions about what's going on with you, how is your day, like what do you think about yourself as a dad right now? Like questions like that, continue to update that. But from a place of, I don't know, I'm really curious. And right. I think we do that naturally with our friends. I think healthy friendships do that. And another thing that I think is really important is just the quality time. I mean, I think that's another super obvious one, but people really do not do it. it's kind of like the Sabbath. Sometimes people are like, yeah, I know I need a day of rest, but like don't have time.
Right.
It's recommended that you spend 6 to 10 hours of sort of face time with your spouse per week to have a healthy relationship. And so I think it is a challenge for us to get the 6 hours, let alone the 10, unless we're on vacation or something. But having time where you like do the dishes together, or you cook a meal together, or you go on a date night, or you have coffee in the morning, like all those things add up. And it's in those times that you're saying positive things on purpose. Like, it's also recommended to have that like 5-to-1 positive to negative ratio, to stay in what like Dr. Gottman would call like a positive sentiment override. So you are just thinking well of your spouse. You're constantly thinking of things you appreciate or that you admire about them, and you're telling them about it, saying positive things, because inevitably there'll be a conflict or something that comes along, and it's going to go over much better if you have a lot of those positive deposits.
Right.
So I think of those things with friendship as just time and curiosity.
Yeah.
What about you?
I think that when we look at our marriages as one of the greatest things that we can do to help stabilize and when times get tough or we're feeling more disconnected, is to go back to friendship and really like, how is our friendship doing? Just friendship helps me think through the lens of like, okay, activities, like, okay, we do change over time, but when we started dating or whatever, what brought us together? What did we love? What were our passions, our hobbies, maybe before all the craziness of the kids, like what were we doing more together that we loved, and everyone's different, if it was, and so I think kind of rediscovering those things, or like, again, interest change, maybe you can't play flag football now that you're 48 and, body falling apart.
You can't.
Well, I'm not 48 yet, but I'm, but I mean, I guess that's what I think of just like, what things did we love?
Yeah. Well, I remember one of the first things we really enjoyed doing together, even before we were an official couple, was we did the t-shirt parties where you like, we used t-shirt transfers. This was back in like 2006, but we used t-shirt transfers with like an inkjet printer, and would just come up with these designs, like goofy, crazy designs, and would you and all your work friends, and then some of our friends would just come up with crazy, hilarious.
I don't know where this concept was birthed.
Phrases. It was totally your
idea. But
I
got to give a shout out to my old buddy in St. Louis, Jeff Eldon, wherever you are, is that he was part of this too. But it was like this one of the most ridiculous ideas ever, and like it's like you said, it was coming together with friends, and the idea was we traded names, like a gift exchange.
Yeah. And
whoever's name you got, you were making them a t-shirt, correct?
But they didn't know what it was going to be.
Right. And so you would come up with the most random, or how, some people maybe they were trying to make it stylistic or cool, I don't know, but most people the idea was completely random. So I remember here's an example of a shirt. It was monkeys, picking ticks off each other was the picture, the image on there, and it was something like National Yogurt Day. I mean, it just completely like, and then the idea is that you had to wear it too out in public.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, like I know it's
like
ridiculous,
a wearable version of the Dollar General. Or what do they call? What'd you call it, Clark?
Well, it had a couple different names, but the grocery getter was
the grocery getter, right?
It's a wearable, but I know it's a ridiculous story and idea, thing, but those were things that were funny. And when I look back at year in my life, like you said, this was before we were really even an official couple. But even though that's a ridiculous activity to look at now and funny, it's that you and I gained so much spark and connection through creating. We still do. And so like even that, planted the seed of that, looking back at those t-shirts. But now, it's other things. We build connection through creating together.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's finding what makes you two come alive together. What used to, if you've lost that spark.
Yeah.
And it may be, I know I've seen like couples, mountain biking together, hiking together. Maybe it's going to, baseball games, whatever those things are.
Yeah. So when we talked about appreciation quite a bit, but like why is that so important for marriage and the things you've learned from some of the Gottman stuff? Like what do you see in terms of that?
Well, appreciation, I think, from things I'm learning is we want to be seen. I mean, even us guys that, might seem like there's tough exteriors, underneath that is the human need is to be seen.
Right. Well, and I guess
I matter.
The 5 love languages term for that would be like words of affirmation.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think more generally, men especially have more of it to be respected. And I think to be appreciated is a form of respecting. I appreciate this, I respect this in you. But I do think across genders, there's this idea that, I see you, I see what you're doing, that you've done, that you're trying, that you're helping with, that you're, those words of whether you say affirmation, appreciation, it is, you are seeing me, you're recognizing me. And those moments build us up.
Yeah.
Together, man or woman.
Mm-hmm. Well, and from my perspective, it's like I feel loved when I'm appreciated. Mm-hmm. It's less about respect. It's more like, oh, you recognize how hard I'm working, or the ways I'm serving, and you're just taking the time to acknowledge. Like I would actually do all of the things and more without ever getting thanks, but there's something to hearing someone say, I see you. It's not like you're getting credit. Like I don't need the credit, but being seen and noticed.
It's huge. It makes you feel loved. And I think that's one of my favorite things about what we've learned so far in the Gottman courses and material is just this idea that, we can look at these big moments of like, well, if we were only just able to get away and, spend more quality time together, or if we were just able to like more often go on dates, things like that. And those are key things we have to prioritize and try to do. But what I think the Gottman stuff is helping remind me of is it's the small daily things when you're together that you might overlook. Those things are what is building a foundation every day. They're not always sexy. They're not always like the biggest notice things, but they are the building blocks. And I'm really seeing that more and more of just like, they talk a lot about like making a bid for connection. Whether it's, wanting to share a story, sharing something that happened to you at work, something that you're feeling. Those are bids for connecting. And again, we all do desire connection. We all make bids for connection. And so I think when the reminder is, when we can validate someone's bid for a connection on a daily basis throughout the day, their research is showing significantly that those are the people that remain together.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it's important to just talk a little bit more about why they were doing the research that they were, that, the Gottmans, John started over 4 years ago observing couples because he recognized he had a pretty poor track record in relationships, and he wanted to know what makes couples last and what makes couples fail. And, they were able to identify with, was it 90 something percent accuracy?
Was it 92 or something? But yeah.
Like whether a couple will stay together or get divorced. And really honing in on what are the main predictors of divorce. And they were things like starting conversations harshly and not, being cautious or careful how maybe just starting things off with a negative tone was one of the things. The flooding, being flooded and dysregulated quickly was another. Body language, like I think couples that they observed that just didn't make eye contact or like physically turned away from each other. And those are examples of when somebody is sort of stonewalling or not interacting. They're just kind of shut down. Or, if you're being really reactive or angry, I mean, your hands may be pointing fingers or things like that. Like all that would be some of those signs if that happens quite often. And I think you mentioned repair attempts, like when someone is trying to get things back on track and, make things right, if you kind of have that negative tone and you don't accept their bid for connection or their attempt to repair, that's a pretty bad sign for a relationship long term. Right. Just holding grudges would be another way of talking about that. And then just in general, having bad memories, right? If you are constantly critical or have contempt for your spouse, you're not going to recall a lot of great stories and fond memories. Fondness is not there. Friendship is not there. So these predictors of divorce that they researched, they pinpointed, this is what makes marriages fail. And talking about, I think the last one is the 4 horsemen was one of the major ones. I think most people know the Gottmans for this concept that the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are these things. It's criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. And each of those things were really big factors that came into a relationship and just tore it apart. And so there are some sort of antidotes. They started realizing there's a flip side to all of these predictors of divorce and these things that damage relationships. And so, they have really taught us, and we've been practicing some of these things, is, when criticism is your tendency to, tell somebody that they're wrong. Instead, think of a more positive way to describe what you need or what you hope for, things like that. That would be a gentle startup, right?
Yeah. So the next one would be contempt, the next 4 horsemen, which we've talked about. And so that's attacking, sort of an attacking sense of self with an intent to insult or abuse is their definition. And we all know what contempt is. We hold contempt. It's a really unhealthy thing. So the antidote to that, which we've already talked about, is appreciation, building a culture of appreciation, reminding yourself of your partner's positive qualities. Sometimes taking a big picture, maybe am I too caught up in this one area that's really like bothering me, and not dismissing that, little areas shouldn't be things we work on, but there's sometimes that we get so caught up in those things too that,
Right. Yeah. The next one is defensiveness. I think, that can go both ways. You can be real harsh in your response to someone. Maybe they were critical. Well, the very next thing that you're going to get when you criticize somebody is usually defensiveness. So, that often is no, you're not right. That's not me. I'm not going to assume blame for what you just said. Or it's, pity party for myself and I'm going to play the victim. You don't appreciate me. You don't love me. You just think I'm terrible. Like those are both ways of being defensive. And what they really talk about as the antidote for defensiveness is if you don't want to display that or, that taking responsibility for some even small part of the challenge that you're facing is really, really important,
Yeah.
So then stonewalling.
Stonewalling. I'm an expert at it. Expert stonewaller.
I agree.
So stonewalling tends to be more of a male thing. Not always. There's definitely women and friends we've talked to that they might say in their relationship they're the stonewaller. But it's the tendency to withdraw to avoid conflict and convey disapproval, distance, and separation. Now, I want to clarify this because as an Enneagram 8, I don't withdraw from a lot of conflict. I mean, I at times, but
not initially.
Not initially. What this isn't saying is that you're necessarily quick to just withdraw from conflict. This is saying when things build to a certain whatever, like you get to a certain...
They can escalate to a point that you don't want to make things worse, right?
That you want to make things worse. So this is more where at some point the person decides, look, I don't want to make this worse. Or I feel like I can't say the right thing, or maybe I'm too angry. And so I just don't want to jeopardize making something worse. So I'm going to, I mean, in some ways it's trying to be sort of, I think, a protective thing to say, I'm just going to shut down for a while.
Well, I think the way they describe it is it's not even just a choice. Like it's a psychological, like it's your body's flooded
overwhelmed.
And you're overwhelmed and you're trying to self-soothe by just almost being still and frozen and shut down. Right. And it actually makes the other person escalate because they want a response. Right. And so...
Well, and I think you can stonewall too when you feel shame. You feel shame and just like, oh, I just can't, and it's like, there can be a temptation to just shut down. And so...
like the antidote, though, would be soothing, right?
Physiological is a good word, Scrabble word. Self-soothing, physiological. It's taking a break, spending the time doing something soothing, distracting. What would you say for those of us Stonewall experts out there or practitioners of the Stonewall, when you are feeling those things and how can you still kind of make that space? I mean, this is what we're talking about, the self-soothing, but how can you saying I need a break, let's come back to saying something that alerts them I'm not just like shutting you out and shutting down.
Well, we're starting to use the language of let's just call flooded. Like I need some time. I need 20 minutes or more to just kind of get back to baseline. And the best thing for somebody who's experiencing that flooding and is maybe has a tendency to stonewall is like go for a walk, do some deep breathing, do something fun, do something you enjoy. Any of those things are going to get you out of the shutdown mode and get you back to a place where you might be able to like talk again, and repair, even though most of the time when things get to that point, you're not going to resolve every aspect of it. Mm-hmm.
But wouldn't you say on the front end of those things is that's where communication comes into say, when this happens, this is what my plan would be, where you talk through those things. Because then you just do that, and it's like, wait, so you're just going to a brewery because you're going mountain biking just suddenly because you...
Well, you say, you have to... I need we need to take a pause on this, and and let's come back to it. We'll come back to it, tonight or tomorrow morning when we've slept some or whatever.
Yep.
So that's just a little bit about the Gottmans. I feel like we gave a little more than a little bit, but just the overview of what they've done to create these materials. So they created the Gottman Institute, and they're training therapists all over the world to be able to use these tools with couples and individuals to help them relate better in marriage and relationships. So even parenting tools, they've used these principles for. But now they even have lay training programs like this 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work workshop, training, which is what we did. So we're just love it, and we're using it in our marriage group now, and so we'll report back when we're done, I guess. So, what would you say has been your very favorite part about engaging some of the Gottman stuff that's kind of helped foster a better friendship?
I think I've already
Recently.
said it to some degree. I would say the same thing. It's the accessibility. We can go to conferences, seminars, all these things, books. Certainly can be helpful. Not a knock there, but what I've appreciated is so much of this stuff is right in front of our eyes. It's the research telling us why this is effective. It's saying in couples who don't do this one thing, like don't respond to bids for connection, the divorce rate is, X percent compared to those who do this. So it's highly credible in these things of going, oh my gosh, this is a 50% gap of divorces based on people doing this thing or that thing. And they're like not deep level thinking things. It's like, are you going to acknowledge your spouse when, they're trying to connect, or just keep, doing, so I think some of it is that the ideas around like, the four horsemen. I mean, I think that kind of can burn into our minds of like, wow, okay, that's a really sobering thing. I kind of like the imagery of that, of like, yeah, these are the major, you do these things and you're on track for some bad outcomes. So again, I think kind of the simplicity of that and the reminders, yeah, and just the basic building blocks of friendship as the backdrop to, just even the research I think they talk about with even just how you affirm what someone's feeling. When you're quick, and we all can be, some of us can be quick to like correct or try to fix, and more often I think it's, they're talking about listening and trying to affirm what you can. Yes, offer to fix when it's asked for, but,
Yeah, I do like that part. There is an aspect to helping reduce stress in your spouse because you view them as somebody that you deeply care for. You're not correcting them when it's not critical that you correct them just to be right. Like you just empathize and validate and listen, and if they ask for your advice, you can give it. But so many opportunities to just be their friend and not tell them what to do.
Right.
That's helped me a lot.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. Yeah, it's been great. So let's wind this thing down to the end. Do you want to talk a little bit about emotional safety?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's probably been my favorite thing about using these tools is it actually creates emotional safety. Like being able to know that there's going to be this constant flow and deposits of fondness and appreciation and friendship and time and it creates that culture like we talked about at the beginning, this culture in our marriage that feels safe. I feel known, and definitely can weather a lot more conflict and a lot more things that come up when that is flowing.
All right, so what strategies can couples use to help work on developing emotional safety?
Yeah, one of the principles is that turning towards emotion instead of away. So like it's so common that when somebody comes at you, your spouse comes at you with frustration and you just see the anger, you immediately feel triggered. But if you can try to see the sadness, fear, or shame that's beneath that frustration, you can actually turn towards and attune to the emotion and just see it as like, I often tell clients this, is like, look at them as if they were a child. Don't treat them like a child, but have compassion for their emotional state like they were a child. Yeah. Like, what would you do if your child came to you and was like frantic about something that's a problem for them? Like your face would be like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, tell me more. Like, what can I do? I don't want you to feel that way.
Right.
Like, it would just be this natural, like, please let me help make this better for you.
Right.
And we just don't do that naturally with our spouses because we like feel threatened.
Yeah. No, that's very true. Yeah, again, it comes back to so much. Comes back to friendship.
Yeah. Yeah, another thing with that turning towards is just saying that makes sense. You know, if they're expressing frustration or anger or whatever, that's a way of taking responsibility instead of being defensive. Is just saying, like, that makes sense. Like, I understand. You're not saying, I'm sorry, I'm guilty of what you just accused me of. You're just saying, I think what you're experiencing right now, given it makes sense that you would feel that way. Like,
right.
Or you say sorry if it's necessary for you to apologize, like do that. So
yeah,
all those things would create that emotional safety.
Yep. Yeah, really, it's helpful stuff. It's helpful when we really invest and apply it and work on it. So, all right. Well, a couple things as we close this thing down. So one is that in this podcast, Cultivate the Ordinary, which we had a blast doing, it's been a really fun year of getting to interview a lot of friends and new people too that we've never met that have really been inspiring and have really challenged thinking or enlarged the way we've looked at things, and hopefully have deepened all of our relationship with God as well in different ways. And so what we're going to do is we're going to probably maybe have a couple episodes left in this season and wrap this first season up, and then kind of gear up for some changes and different things. And then the new year, we're going to look to launch a new podcast that's more about relationships and connection and marriage tips and maybe things with family, things like that. And also keep Cultivate the Ordinary going. So kind of two separate podcasts. So this one that we're on right now would still exist with stories and inspirational people and kind of lives that, just paint a picture of like how people are, shaping their world through imagination and curiosity and seeking God. So God's presence,
soul care
in the ordinary. Yeah. So that's an exciting thing we're looking forward to. Anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay. Stay tuned on that. I will take you out with hopefully you will find this quote life-changingly helpful. Here you go, by Margaret Mead. Always remember that you are absolutely unique, just like everyone else. So take that and
I love it.
It'll change your life. Thanks for listening to the podcast today. I hope you found something helpful, hopeful, or thought-provoking. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to any resources mentioned in the podcast. And we also have links in the notes for our own resources to check out. We would really love to hear from you. And we're also really grateful for your support by sharing the podcast episodes with your friends and family and leaving a rating and review. May we all regain and maintain our wonder, hope, and inspiration as we look at our ordinary through new and fresh eyes.